Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, of course, I thought that I would talk about the Teofimo Lopez fight that ended up happening yesterday. And I do apologize overall that I did not commentate on it yesterday, but I overall was just a little bit too tired. And on top of that, I had, something else to do. But overall, I am going to talk about it now because I do think that this is a very interesting conversation, at least a short little conversation that I could have, especially about the future of Mr. Teofimo Lopez and what he could potentially do at the 140-pound division. Because Teofimo Lopez, in his fight, I believe, against the fighter that was named Campa, a Mexican fighter, I believe, who I'm not really going to call him a journeyman fighter because he only had one loss on his record, but he certainly, in my opinion, was not an A-grade fighter. I actually thought that Teofimo was going into the ring with Mr. Barboza, actually, so that's why I believe that this was not a soft touch, but I actually got my fighters mixed up. But anyways, when it comes down to it all in all, I do believe, in my view, that this was a very decent comeback by Mr. Teofimo Lopez. I thought that he looked fantastic. I thought that his movement looked very good. I thought that his power looked good. And I thought that for his first fight at 140 pounds against the fighter that pretty much was putting on a certain amount of pressure, had a little bit of pop in his punches, and overall was coming straight at him the whole entire time, I thought that Teofimo Lopez looked pretty damn good. But of course, Campa is not one of the more elite fighters within that weight division. The big question is about Mr. Teofimo Lopez is where does his career trajectory go from here? Is he actually able to beat any of the championship qualifying contenders at 140 pounds? Will he actually be able to defeat that of a Josh Taylor? Would he be able to defeat that of a Regis Prograis, a Jose Ramirez, any one of those fighters, or a Barboza? I'm not necessarily sure, too sure about that. That's not me necessarily counting him out because I thought that Teofimo Lopez actually looked very, very good yesterday. But what I am saying is that this is going to be the first time in Teofimo Lopez's career where if he does face A-grade contenders, these guys are going to be around the same size as him. And sometimes, all in all, they may be able to compete with him in terms of skills and also power. Because when he fought Vasily Lomachenko, even though Lomachenko, in my opinion, he was a greatly skilled fighter, Lomachenko also was about one, probably two weight classes lower naturally than that of a Teofimo Lopez. He probably was a good solid two weight classes below that of a Teofimo Lopez. Now, that is not me trying to strip away credit, but what that is me saying is that sometimes when fighters like early on in their career, like an Oscar De La Hoya, who were fighting fighters early on in their career that were decently smaller or lighter than them, and then all of a sudden they fight fighters that are around their own same size. It's almost kind of like a shock to them. That's why Oscar ended up losing some of the fights, even earlier on in his career to Felix Tito Trinidad or Sugar Shane Mosley. Now, a couple of those ones were controversial, but Oscar De La Hoya, when he usually fought fighters that were not only decently skilled, but similar in his size or could handle his size, he had a very big issue with that. Will Teofimo Lopez be the same? We'll have to see about that. But anyways, Mr. Dante's Boxing Nation, he's going to talk about the future potential of Teofimo Lopez at 140 pounds, and I'm going to tune in.
I just turned 25, and we want Josh Taylor. We want these guys. We want Prograis. We want Pedro. We want all the belts. That's really who we want. We want to become a two-time undisputed world champion.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So that right there was Teofimo Lopez, his post-fight interview, saying that he wants to fight Regis Prograis or Josh Taylor next. Regardless of how serious Teofimo was when he said that, I'm actually surprised that he even mentioned Regis Prograis' name. And I'll tell you guys why I'm surprised. But first, I want to go ahead and share what Regis Prograis said in response to Teofimo calling him out.
Another fight that could potentially be on the table as well because they ended up mentioning this fight. So what that tells me is that more than likely they're looking after this fight next is a Ryan Garcia versus Teofimo Lopez fight. I would personally love to see that fight, especially after the way that Teofimo Lopez looked tonight. If Ryan Garcia versus Teofimo Lopez happened, I think before this fight, I would have predicted Ryan Garcia to beat Teofimo Lopez. But if Teofimo shows up in that fashion, it's really a fight that, in my opinion, could go either way. I may even, slightly favor that of a Teofimo. But we'll have to see what happens.
Regis, he said, good little comeback, but the dogs at 140 will chew him up. Now, what's really interesting is Regis is not just saying he will beat Tio. He's saying that all of the top guys would chew him up, which means Regis sees Teofimo Lopez as arguably the weakest link entering that division. And I completely agree. I don't see Teofimo Lopez beating Regis Prograis, Arnold Barboza, a fight that
Well, when we talk about all these guys here, when we talk about him debatably defeating Regis Prograis or Arnold Barboza, I could see him maybe winning those fights. Josh Taylor, at his best, in my opinion, that's going to be very tough. Because Josh Taylor, in my opinion, not only does he have decent power, but at his best, he is the most complete fighter of that weight division. And he's a decent athlete. So it's going to be very, very decently tough when it comes down to it all in all for Teofimo Lopez, in my view, to become a champion there. And I'm not even 100% sure if he would beat a Regis Prograis, or I believe that's Gary Antoine Russell, or whoever the hell that is, when it comes down to one of the Russell brothers. But at the end of the day, Teofimo Lopez, he is overall going to have to be the best that he has ever been. So it's going to be very particularly interesting. A fight I would love to see Teofimo Lopez in is in that Barboza fight next. That would be a great fight.
it to Teofimo Lopez, but he decided to take the easier Pedro Campa route. I don't see Teofimo beating Josh Taylor, and I certainly don't see him beating Gary Antoine Russell. See, guys, unfortunately for Teofimo Lopez, there are no weak divisions for him to retreat to. He doesn't have like a weak 168-pound division like Canelo had when he moved there, to where he could fight.
And of course, here come the shots at Canelo Alvarez, because Dante hates Canelo Alvarez's guts still to this day. And that's why he talks so much about Canelo Alvarez, because he needs Canelo Alvarez gone. He needs Canelo Alvarez overall. He doesn't even want to see his name at the top of the sport. All right? So that's why he talks so much shit about Canelo Alvarez. But anyway.
But C-level white/European fighters. It's bad right now.
Yes, C-level white/European fighters that you allegedly called decent fighters before Canelo Alvarez fought them. Fighters all in all that you used their name against Canelo before he fought them, but then when he fought them, you allegedly said that they were just weak competition. Like, get the fuck out of here, man. It just is what it is. But if you're smart enough in the sport of boxing and just, intelligent enough in general, you know the difference between a C-grade fighter and an A-grade fighter. Caleb Plant, Callum Smith, and Billy Joe Saunders, all those guys were at least on the A- level. Okay, it just is what it is. Fighters that, if you want to talk about them being lower, for example, Jamel Charlo, like Dante, he always tries to uplift Jamel Charlo's resume to being much greater than what it actually is. Besides Brian Castano, who has he beat that's ever been A-grade? He's never defeated anyone who's ever been A-grade. Like, he always tries to tell you that Tony Harrison, he's so talented. Tony Harrison is a B- to C+ fighter. And Jamel Charlo could barely get past him. So I just find that interesting. But anyway.
Teofimo. If he would have stayed at 135, there was tough competition. He moves up to 140, and the competition is actually tougher, only because not only are the fighters skilled, but they are naturally bigger, which is the reason why I believe.
I would somewhat agree with that. I don't know. All in all, that at least from a competition standpoint, that it will be tougher from a talent perspective. But in terms of the talent and the fighters being bigger, if you want to say that it's tougher for Teofimo Lopez individually, I wouldn't have a problem with that. I would agree.
Steve Campa, he was able to eat damn near 100 of Lopez's most hardest, cleanest punches. And a lot of those punches were counter punches that Campa didn't even see coming. The punches that Teo was hitting Campa with over and over and over again, one of those punches would normally knock out a fighter at 135. That's the difference from moving up in weight.
Well, let me overall give Teofimo Lopez a little bit of credit. He was in there against a fighter that was very strong-willed, had a lot of heart. So we'll see what Teofimo Lopez does. But what I will say is this. Dante does somewhat have a point to where if Teofimo Lopez does get in the ring with the Josh Taylor or Regis Prograis, he's not going to be able to knock out these guys more than likely with just one shot like he was able to do at 135. So it's going to be very particularly interesting to see what Teofimo Lopez is going to be able to do.
And when it comes to Prograis, he already has one of the best chins in the sport of boxing today. I've never seen him hurt. He's extremely durable. On top of that, he has a great defense and he's a slick boxer. That's a hell of a combination. There was time.
Well, I wouldn't really say that Regis Prograis has a great defense. Regis Prograis, all in all, when he was against Josh Taylor, he got hit with way too many shots. And even some of his other fights, he gets hit with too many shots. But we all know why Dante is saying that. Anyway.
in the Ocampa fight where Ocampa's pressure was making Lopez a little uncomfortable. And if that guy can make Lopez uncomfortable even for a couple of rounds, imagine what fighters like Regis Prograis can do. Because
Well, we'll see what happens because fight math isn't always what works, but I do understand overall what Dante is saying here. Teofimo Lopez, all in all, it's going to be very interesting once again to see what he is going to be able to do because this is not going to be a division where he is going to outsize a lot of these guys like he outsized Vasily Lomachenko by 2 weight classes. All right, these are going to be guys that are going to be just as big as him and may even have just as much power as him. I thought that Teofimo Lopez looked very slick, and overall for a fighter, especially who suffered his first loss, I thought that it came back very mentally well. Now, of course, it was against a fighter that was probably a C-grade fighter, but at the end of the day, I still give Teofimo Lopez credit because the guy was trying to put on a lot of pressure, all in all, when it came down to it, and he seemed like he had a lot of heart. So Teofimo gets a certain amount of credit from me, but these big fights at 140, it's going to be very interesting to see where Teofimo goes from here.
just he knows how to apply the pressure, and he also knows how to box. Teofimo Lopez is a mid-range puncher, a mid-range counter puncher. He's not an inside fighter. He doesn't feel comfortable fighting on the inside, and this is the reason why he did so good against Loma.
Well, I'm not going to say all in all that he's not an inside fighter, but what I will say is this, that if you're able to get within Teofimo's close range, and if you're able to mix it up over a little bit, he will sometimes get a little bit uncomfortable. Because Teofimo, what he mainly prefers, all in all, is to usually be at a distance. What he reminds me of is that he reminds me of trying to be like a Floyd Mayweather Jr. mimic. That's what he tries to do. He loves to be on the back foot and counter, at least do the things that he thinks that Floyd Mayweather Jr. can do. So this is what it is. But Teofimo, he is a very decent all-around boxer. He can fight a little bit on the inside, but because he's mainly defensive-minded, at least from what I see, if you are able to get inside his range and overall show a little bit of power, and overall, put him on the back foot a little bit and hit him here and there, you might make him a little bit uncomfortable. That's why if Teofimo fights any one of these top-level fighters at 140, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens.
Because Lomachenko is also not an inside fighter. He's a counterpuncher. And Lomachenko...
Well, that's not true whatsoever. Lomachenko can pretty much fight in any dimension. The problem was with Lomachenko overall in that fight is that Lomachenko, I think that he thought that Teofimo was going to tire out a little bit later on. And apparently he said he had a shoulder injury. I'm not sure if I'm believing it, but it is what it is. But, Lomachenko really did not start off in that fight. But Lomachenko is great from any dimension. It's just that Lomachenko, not only do I think that he had the completely wrong strategy for Teofimo Lopez, but on top of that, I think all in all that Lomachenko was decently smaller. That's not from, me trying to give an excuse. At the end of the day, you were supposed to win that fight. But, Teofimo is going to have a much harder time against some of these 140-pounders than what he did against Vasily Lomachenko, who was decently outsized.
Already said after he lost to Teofimo, he said, the reason why I didn't let my hands go for the first 6 rounds, because I felt I was never in a position to hit him and not get hit with something in return. Lomachenko admitted this, guys.
Well, right, Dante, but come on, let's not sit here and say that Lomachenko is not an inside fighter. Basically, what that means is that, all in all, that Lomachenko, that he couldn't really get him overall without Teofimo Lopez trying to hit him from the outside. So that's why Lomachenko did not take the risk, because he was decently outsized, excuse me. But don't sit here and say that Lomachenko is not an inside fighter. Lomachenko is a great all-around fighter, but he did not put on his best performance in that Teofimo Lopez fight.
This is the reason why it was so easy, or much easier, for Lopez to beat Loma. Because he didn't have to...
Well, it was easier for him to beat Lomachenko because Lomachenko was way too afraid in that fight that Teofimo was going to hit him with something and knock him out with one shot. So Lomachenko, I think, put on the wrong strategy. He was hoping that Lopez, that he was overall going to tire out and that eventually he would be able to take over within the final several rounds. And it just didn't happen that way.
Worry about any type of inside game. He was fighting a smaller fighter who was fighting a very defensive fight. And all Lopez had to do is control distance. He was able to feint and control him with the jab and take away Lomachenko's angles. Once he did that, Lomachenko did not feel comfortable to let his hands go. But it's a different ball game when you have fighters that fight on the inside, fight on the outside. and they can walk through some of your best.
Well, once again, Lomachenko can do all of that, but the problem with Lomachenko was that when it came down to it, that he was just way too afraid. And like I said, you have to risk it to get the biscuit. If you're a person or if you're a boxer that you're too afraid to go in there because the fighter has a certain amount of power, listen, I get it, but at the end of the day, you have to take risks in a fight. And Lomachenko didn't do anything within the first several rounds of that fight. So he has no one else to blame but himself.
Punches and hit you with their best punches.
But if Lomachenko had no inside game, I just think that that's a little bit ridiculous. Go ahead and take a look at his fights against, Jose Pedraza and a lot of these other guys. Yes, he's a counter puncher, but you can still be an inside fighter and be a counter puncher. The problem with Lomachenko in that fight is that he was not able to handle Teofimo Lopez's size, and he was too afraid of his power. So what really was wrong with Lomachenko in that fight is that overall he was way too apprehensive to throw, and that'll lose you fights.
That's a game changer. So I personally believe it's all downhill from this point on when it comes to Teofimo Lopez if he is going to step up and fight against, as Regis Prograis put it.
Well, we'll see what happens with Mr. Teofimo Lopez. Let's also be real, Dante. If this were a Gervonta Tank Davis, you'd be having a little bit of a different energy because we all know what you're about. But we'll see what happens with Mr. Teofimo Lopez. I'm very excited to see what happens at 140. It does not seem that his power affects them as much as what it did in the lower weight classes. And that's the same thing that happened to Vasily Lomachenko. Because Lomachenko's a natural 126 to 130 pounder. So the more that he moved up, and when he was finally at 135, some of those fighters, they outweigh him by a decent amount. So at the end of the day, is your power or is your skill set enough to carry you on? We'll see what happens.
The top dogs in the division. Because I'm telling you right now, going from fighting Pedro Campa to Regis Prograis or Josh Taylor, it's going to be a hell of a leap for a fighter like Teofimo Lopez. That's all
I would agree.
I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one.
But anyways, that's really about it for this video. I just thought that would be very particularly interesting, but let's see what happens with Mr. Teofimo Lopez, because I am personally very excited to see his tenure at 140 pounds, but it should be very interesting. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.